Hey, welcome to Unlatched Mind. This is Vinny. My guest today is Dr. Kelly Bulkeley. Kelly's the director of the Sleep and Dream database. Really cool. It's basically a digital database and search engine designed to promote dream research. So they have big plans there, really to unleash some big data tools on this kind of database, this massive archive they're building to see what they can kind of extract out of it over time. So it's a really cool concept in general. I don't know, I haven't really dug into the details and we didn't really touch on it, but I don't know if there's anything else out there like that. You can check that out at sleepanddreamdatabase.org. So Kelly and I spoke about a lot of things related to dream research, dream science, if you will. We touched on the consciousness of dreaming, the whole lucid dreaming. Can you actually control your dreams type thing? I was a little surprised there. I learned a ton. I didn't really think it was that real. After digging in a little bit and prepping for this episode and talking to Dr. Bulkeley, it's they have some pretty good evidence that it's absolutely real, and folks have been doing it for quite some time, and even have some third party verification as they know how they can verify that folks are actually controlling the dream. So really cool there. We talked about some of the differences between from a neuroscience perspective, the differences between while you're in a dream state versus a conscious state. And the reality is, from a neuroscience perspective, from what we can measure in the brain, there's not a big difference. There's not a lot of difference at all, which is really, really interesting. We also touched on some of the religious and cultural perspectives on dreaming. And then we kind of rounded it out with, and this is one of my favorite parts of the discussion, really, where we talked about, can dreams themselves be a major tool, I would say, in the human toolbox, if you will, to aid us in becoming more mindful. There's a lot of revelations that our dreams present to us that if we were just listening, if we can just recognize them and acknowledge them and then utilize them, they really could be a great tool for us dealing with stress, or understanding our thoughts better, dealing with or even just kind of trying to achieve a higher consciousness of what's going on, how we feel about certain things, why we react certain ways. So, and the science is kind of, I would say is in this area is really starting to show that a lot of that's not just bull. There's actually some real science behind it. So anyway, great conversation. So with that, I give you Dr. Bulkeley. Well, Kelly, I appreciate your time. I really do.
Yeah. Glad to have a chat with you.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I mean, I found you online, and I think I was searching for lucid dreaming. I have a few friends at work that, we always kind of go down these rabbit holes of
right,
all kinds of things, non-work related. And then one time it was really lucid dreaming, and one of my buddies was claiming, hey, I really get into this, and controlling your dreams is the coolest thing. And I honestly didn't think it was real. I mean, I've heard of it, and
yeah.
So. Long story short, it's always been a topic of interest. What's going on in there is obviously super complicated. So, and I found a bunch of your writings, and I said, "Oh man, this is exactly what I like to talk about." So, I hit you up, and then here we are. So,
yeah, wonderful.
So I guess if you want to start off, just let the listeners know who you are and what you got going on.
Yeah. Well, my name's Kelly Bulkeley. I'm a dream researcher, director of the Sleep and Dream database, a digital archive and search engine for the study of dreams. I have a PhD in the psychology of religion, and through my career, I've focused on dreams in relation to science, religion, history, art, psychology, culture, anything I can think of that has some relevance to dreaming, I'm interested in it. And and just never-ending fun in this area of study. So
very cool.
Glad to get to chat with you.
Yeah. So psychology of religion. I mean, just what that's that in itself is an interesting phrase. How?
Yeah.
I mean, what's that about? It's a little bit of a tangent, but.
Well, no. It actually is kind of central, because I got interested in dreams when I was kind of late teens, early 20s, and the first place I turned was psychology, and I just found that it was so sort of statistically oriented and behaviorist, at least at the time when I was studying it, and so I just thought, wow, this isn't really getting at what makes dreaming interesting to me, as I was kind of first kind of thinking about it and exploring
Right.
dreams. And I found that before psychology arose in the mid 19th century, the main arena in which humans talked about their dreams was religion and mythology and mysticism and spirituality. So I decided the best place to study dreams was from a perspective of the psychology of religion, looking at kind of the whole sweep of human history and how humans have looked at dreams, but using a psychological, as much of a psychological lens as makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's been the path.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I mean, psychology of religion and talking about dreaming tends to give the impression that, well, it's interesting because at the top level, you would think, okay, if someone's interested in dreaming and psychology of religion, they must automatically think religion must be all just fake because dreams are all fake. However,
Right.
you go through your writing and you really start to dig into, well, is there a distinction between reality, between dreaming? Like, I don't know, at some point you had said, I think from neuroscience perspective, what's going on in the brain while dreaming versus while awake is not really that different. And we'll dig into
Yeah.
that, but so it's an interesting distinction you drew there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the thing that humans through history have been dreaming and waking up and going, whoa, what was that?
Right,
And talking
right,
about them and exploring them and cultivating them. We can talk about that as well. There are many cultures have found ways to actively and intentionally explore the potentials of dreaming. And so it's more than, no, it's definitely not. I mean, my approach is not one of debunking or demystifying. It's more, hey, let's learn from previous masters of this realm and see
right.
how we can bring it forward into contemporary practice.
And we say all the cultures are. So, I mean, and I don't know, at least in what I've seen in my just, whatever experience, dreams are considered fun things that you just remember and that's about it. So these other cultures, are they trying to harness dreams and actually use them and leverage them in creative ways?
Yeah, exactly. The idea is that when we go to sleep and our minds sort of detach from both external sense impressions and the pressure of external action and
Mm-hmm.
behavior, we're liberated to, in my view, to play, to imagine, to go from what is to what might be. And so that's a different kind of intelligence. And my sense, and this not just me, but lots of people in this field, the idea is that we have a 24-hour mind. Our minds are not just on when we're awake and off when we're asleep.
Right, right.
It's a whole package. And so learning about dreams and exploring them as other cultures have is, I think, a way of kind of enhancing our overall vitality and intelligence and well, in certain spiritual realms, people will talk about enlightenment and revelation and such. So yes, it can be a metaphysical path for some people as well.
Right. I mean, reading through some of your literature, I couldn't help but think, I think I had said this in one of the stuff, some of the stuff I had emailed you, but it almost seemed like a free creative outlet, right? If you could actually leverage and harness the power of what's going on in your brain while dreaming, it seems like a whole utility in a toolbox that most of us aren't using. And it reminded me a little bit of how some folks really get into meditation, or even some folks use psychedelics to get to
Yeah.
to really whether it's mindfulness or just to step outside themselves and really hit a reset button on how they feel about certain things. And it really just reminded me of that type of experience and those folks that actually use those methods to have a deeper understanding of who they are, how they feel, why they feel certain ways, and how to approach life. It just seemed like I know the psychedelics thing is more controversial, but you just kind of, I feel like that's a growing area where it's not just it's not just the LSD hippies in the '60s and it's all bad.
Right.
It's all just people that are right.
Yeah,
It's actually very intelligent, very smart people using things like this for really, really intelligent reasons and to really expand how they approach things.
Yeah.
And then I saw
No,
dreaming,
just-
hey, could dreaming be just a free, legal, healthy way to do that exact same thing? You know what I mean?
Precisely. No, you've just kind of summarized, discussions that I had with some of my grad student colleagues in the psychology of religion, some of whom
Very
studied
cool.
The use of psychoactive drugs to create altered states. Entheogens is a term that they would use, substances that you ingest that stimulate some sort of divine revelatory experience. Other people, from a psychology of religion perspective, explore meditation, just as you say.
Right.
And just what you really did, just kind of take the words right out of my mouth. And my sort of perspective was, those are powerful and do take you to new potentials of the mind, but they're either, in the case of meditation, the result of like intentional practice and kind of a very, very kind of virtuoso kind of approach to the mind. And psychoactive medications have, their pros and cons. So sleep and dreaming is natural. It's hardwired into the way our brains have evolved, how they grow in each individual life. It's like to me, it's the most natural and kind of in the healthy state of things, kind of the most I don't want to say normal, but just the most sort of part of the regular flow of being human way to incorporate those powers into our regular life.
Right. Yeah. I mean, now, I'm going to jump all over the place here, but now you so, well, I mean, I'll just jump into it. I mean, controlling dreams, right? The lucid dream thing, is that, so how much of that is, again, I'm not trying to debunk anything either, but I mean, it just seems like the coolest thing. I mean, you could possibly, contemplate, because I've always thought it was possible. And I recall being a child and really I'll never forget this one experience. And, I was like some superhero, whatever typical kind of stuff you see on a cartoon. And I was, and I literally woke up to pee. And I'm not joking. This is exactly what happened. I vividly remember it. I remember being mad that the dream ended because it was such a cool experience. But I was trying to tell myself, go back and be in that same spot, And then I fell asleep. And when I woke up the next day, I remembered how I remembered it was I literally entered that same spot and continued the dream exactly where I left it off. Now, I don't know if that was a memory that was not true and I just dreamed that I remembered it that way. Like, I don't know where reality ended in, so I always thought, hey, it would be so cool if you could actually control dreams. So what does the research say about, and another buddy had told me about, because I'm a science-minded person. I'm like, I feel like a lot of that stuff is, I don't know. But he had told me about studies, and in fact, even today I asked him about it because I told him I was talking to you, and he said, well, there was one study, I guess, where, I guess the researchers had, they told the people, when I do something, you're going to move your eye, you're going to move your eyes or blink your eyes in a certain way. So there's a physical third-party verification.
Yes. So going back to that, if you want to start there.
Sure. Yeah.
There were two research teams who basically did the same experiment, more or less what you described. Keith Hearn in the UK and Stephen LaBerge in the US at Stanford, late 1970s, early 1980s. They were both, Keith Hearn and Stephen LaBerge themselves, frequent lucid dreamers who could go to sleep and in the midst fully of the depth of sleep become conscious and aware of what was that they were dreaming and to some extent influence what happened in the dream state. And both of them did this experiment where they slept in a sleep laboratory with an EEG, an electroencephalograph attached to their head and an eye monitor, eye movement monitor as well. And what they found was, so they said, okay, when I go to sleep, and I'm in REM sleep, and you'll be able to see that from the EEG, I will, I'll make a predetermined eye movement because that's the one part of the body, or maybe, one of the very few parts of the body that is not subject to the atonia of REM sleep, the sort of general muscular relaxation. That's why we're literally paralyzed in REM sleep. The only part of us
except
that's
your
moving
eyes.
are your eyes, which are going crazy. That's why we call it rapid eye movement sleep, because during this phase of sleep, when dreams, most dreams, not all dreams, but most dreams happen, things are going nuts. And so for these researchers to be able to signal from within the depths of REM sleep, by all physiological measurements, they're sleeping. They are asleep. They were able to consciously signal through their predetermined eye movements that indeed they were conscious while asleep. And so that's been replicated. Other people have. I mean, that's kind of accepted now. People, it's one of these things like everyone resisted it, and then it's like, oh well, of course.
Right. So that's old news now in this field, apparently. See, because I heard it, as recent as today. I was like, no way. So
Yeah. Well,
very cool.
It's a traditional practice and concept in many other cultures. So Westerners are kind of slow to catch up to that. I think there is a kind of an Enlightenment bias against the idea that you could be asleep and yet have any degree of rational consciousness. And in fact, and really the better term to use in this regard is metacognition, which is the whole suite of reasoning abilities that involve taking ourselves as an object, thinking about our own thought, being self-aware.
Right.
Remembering things, monitoring our emotions in our bodies. Researchers have found that all of those, virtually everything that we are capable of doing in the waking state at the highest levels of thought, we are also capable of doing in dreaming. The difference is distributional, not categorical, if that makes sense. We just have less of that kind of high level rationality in our dreams usually than in waking, but it's there.
Right.
So it's, again, 24-hour mind. It's not such a sharp difference. And lucidity is sort of the peak moment of conscious awareness and potentially control in the dream state. So yes, that is both scientifically validated, I think, at this point, and wide open for exploration.
That's fascinating. Yeah. So, because one of the questions I always have for people, they don't really know how to answer it, and I think you just did, was, well, I always said, well, I've dreamt before that I was controlling my dream, but I think I was just dreaming that I was controlling my dream, right? So, if I heard you correctly, I was going to ask you this question. I'm like, well, how do you, how are you verifying that you were actually, folks were actually sleeping? And I feel like the EEG was verifying REM state. Is that true?
Yes,
Is that true?
yes.
Okay.
And that's and this gets into both controversial and kind of definitional territory where, some people will have lucid dream experiences in kind of the threshold states, entering into sleep and coming out of sleep, so-called hypnagogic and then hypnopompic states, which have aspects of REM sleep and have aspects of other things. So, people say, oh, those aren't really, I don't know, people get indignant about different aspects of what we define as the time when real dreaming is occurring. But yes, lucid dreaming definitely occurs in REM sleep. In people's actual experiences, I think those threshold states, liminal states, shall we say, are fertile territory for kind of consciousness still being present while the body and the rest of the mind is sleeping. So
no, when obviously sleeping is vital to our health. Is there when you're lucid dream, when you're in this lucid state, are you distracting your body, your mind in any way, your brain in any way, and not getting the quality sleep, I'd say, as if you weren't, as opposed to if you weren't lucid dreaming? I mean, or is there no cost or no
downside?
Right.
Yeah, there's not a simple answer to that. There a lot of people have opinions, but there hasn't been clear research. It certainly neither drives one utterly crazy nor nor is it. I mean, some people will. the concern is, and we don't have research on this, but I would just point out, or note an experience a friend of mine had who's uh, knows a lot about lucid dreaming. We've collaborated on research and publications and such. And he was contacted several years before sort of the bad stuff happened by, I think I want to say Jared Loughner, who is a guy who shot Congresswoman Gabby Giffords.
Oh, right.
And some years ago, and he had like lots of lucid dreams, and contacted my friend about them like 2 years before this shooting happened, just saying, "Whoa, I have these weirdo dreams. What do you think?" And my friend had an exchange or two with him, and got a sense that there was something wrong, I think, pretty quickly. And then after the event, thought, "Wow, that's really, we in this field have to be careful, because sometimes it's not that." And let me be clear, it's not that lucid dreaming can send people over the edge. It's that people maybe who are close to the edge, lucid dreaming becomes part of the slide down.
Well, yeah,
And,
I mean,
you know what I mean? Or the fragmentation, maybe.
well, absolutely. I mean, if we draw if we reference the corollary we made before to mindfulness or the use of psychedelics to enter some state, I mean, you open up certain pieces of Pandora's box that maybe you couldn't get to before. What's in there, perhaps lucid dreaming is not, it's not
Right.
changing the content of what's in there, but you got the key, right? You now
Yeah.
have the key. So
You got the key. And you need, I mean, this is the thing where I feel like as someone basically as a trained in religious studies, I feel this might be helpful in some way, that in many other cultures where what we call lucid dreaming is recognized and understood and venerated as something like, yeah, this is important. This is a spiritual path and a resource. In pretty much all these traditions, and I'm thinking of Hinduism, I'm
Right.
thinking of Australian Aborigines, I'm thinking of some Central American spiritual traditions. You don't just jump into this stuff. You don't just race into the really, intense, far-ranging kinds of experiences that sometimes we're talking about. For
Right.
example, in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition of Naropa, I believe that when you don't get to lucid dreaming till like you've done 2 or 3 years of other things, like a lot of meditation, a lot of visualization, a lot of kind of getting your general act together. So I think that
Right.
is lucid. So upshot, lucid dreaming is possible, and it can be learned, it can be trained, it can be cultivated. It's better, it's probably more efficient and enlightening if it's done as part of a deeper practice, whatever that is.
Right.
Just because you are going to, discover things and encounter things. That's what happens. So it's not all.
Well, on that note about, it could be learned, you just touched on, is that process, I mean, is that something you could tell me right now? Or is that like is that you
Yeah.
need to sit, I feel like when I've been kind of, like I said, I was talking to a couple of friends about it, and it seems like, oh yeah, I just read a book and I can do it. And I was like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah.
I mean, is it, I mean, obviously
Well,
we're not going to try to do it live here, but what are the basic approaches to say if I wanted to try it tonight? What exactly would I do?
I mean, it's as simple as this. Knowing that it is possible enables many people to have lucid dreams.
Hmm.
In a bizarre, but to me, sort of as kind of a cultural critic, it makes a lot of sense. We have a cultural mindset that the mind works a certain way. Many people, once they hear that lucid, and it sounds like your friend, like you read a book, you hear a podcast,
Right.
somebody tells you, hey, this is something that scientists, quote unquote, have validated, and that seems to unlock something. So
Hmm.
and researchers, this is something. This is one of the, I think, hidden gems of insight of dream research, is that many of the limits, the way we perceive dreams influences the kind of dreams we have. And if we in our personal lives, our cultural, social settings have a limited view of dreams, we're going to have limited dreams.
Hmm.
And research is suggesting that if you change people's attention and intention, that in itself can open things up. So that's the general point. I mean, many people will sort of focus on those threshold liminal states, but just as they're entering sleep, just as they're kind of waking up, those, like I said, are times when lucid dreaming often occurs. So if people are trying to lucid dream, those are methods. I mean, people, I think this is kind of fun just generally, but people will do reality checks during the day. So periodically during the day, you'll just say to yourself, hey, am I awake or am I dreaming? And you'll say, okay, I think I'm awake. Maybe you do some little test, you get some totem like in Inception.
Right,
Okay,
right.
I'm awake. I mean,
Right,
Inception,
right,
they there's a feedback loop now between popular culture and research, which is fun.
right,
So
right,
so they're tracking. They're not getting it all wrong.
right. Well, I was going to
And
ask you about that movie and say, hey, is that a good word in your field, or is it a
it was. Oh yeah. I mean, people loved the movie. I mean, many people love the movie. Christopher Nolan's a genius.
Oh, thought it was fantastic. Yeah, I loved
It
it.
was. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was kind of a gloomy movie in some ways. It had a kind of an entropic, gravitational feel to it, like
Hmm.
emotionally and the way it portrayed dreams, which is true to dreaming, but a particularly gloomy slice of dreaming.
Yeah, they
But
had. I'm sure they had to take some Hollywood angle to dramatize, and
yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's
yeah. Well, they did it with the lucid dreaming. I mean, they had the gizmos and whatever the drug cocktail they used,
right.
but the basic idea, I think of well, I mean, they get into shared dreaming, and that's a much more I don't know of any scientific verification of that in the way that they're portraying it there. That it's something that many religious traditions, spiritual traditions around the world talk about. So maybe we're going to catch up with that someday, or maybe that's just a lovely fantasy that we could somehow be in each other's dreams. But that's not. Maybe that's more metaphorical in some way. I'm not sure. That's
You mean like both two folks agreeing to go into a dream state
in,
and act together and be in context with each other in both dreams?
and meeting in a dream space.
Oh,
Yes,
so
that
funny you
that
say that. Yeah. So so my I have a 6-year-old and he goes when he
nice.
goes to bed. I'll say, hey, what do you want? He says, what do you want to dream today, Daddy? So we have a thing where I say, oh, let's dream this, and we'll go on the roller coaster together. And so the next day we talk about, oh, did you dream about this? Yeah, I saw you there. So it's kind of a cute little thing we do, but I
Yeah,
had no idea that
nice.
it was touching on some potential future
Well,
actuality.
I mean, this is the thing. Like here, we sort of tack back and forth between science and anthropology, say, but
Right.
I mean, so there are cultures in parts of Southeast Asia where shamans uh, will claim to engage in battles against each other in their dreams, and they will battle until one of them dies. And I believe it's the Cambodian uh, culture. They have beliefs in being attacked by demons in dreams, such that uh, people will, it seems, just die out of nothing more than a fear that they have been cursed.
Hmm.
It's kind of a nocebo effect through dreams. So. Uh, we don't have scientific. Well, it's hard to imagine even scientific studies that could even begin to test such things. But
Right.
cultures around the world, people around the world, speak of dreaming as touching on these kinds of mysteries, these kinds of horizons of uncertainty in our lives. And that, to me, I don't settle metaphysically or ontologically on any particular point of view in these discussions. I'm just curious where people go, and I
Right.
think it's interesting as we then look for patterns among how humans have been thinking about this.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, you mentioned different cultures a lot, and just hearing you talk about it, I'm wondering, do you feel that the West, us, I would say, just start with the United States,
Yeah,
that we are kind of just, and I think we do this a lot in a lot of different ways, but a lot of different contexts. But are we almost limiting some of dream exploration and the realization of what dreams could truly be based? Is there a religious or cultural, hey, that's not in the Bible. It's that poo poo that.
yeah,
I mean, there's got to be some of that, I
yeah,
would imagine.
yeah. Wow. Well, that's a huge huge topic. And on the one hand, speaking of the United States, hey, we've got this self-image as, the place of the American dream, right? Like,
Hmm.
and that symbolizing a sense of our giving everybody a sense of possibility and imagine a new future. And that really, I think that's not just metaphorical. I think that is a stimulating culture. I think that the contrary, if you're living in a totalitarian society, your dreaming is going to be impacted in a negative way. So
Sure.
I think American society at that level, how widely that's distributed is part of this too. But at the level of the ideal, now we also contemporary times. There's a lot of kind of not helpful to sleep developments in terms of the speed of life, the pressures of late
Yep. Yep.
capitalism,
Absolutely. Yep.
uh, uh, technology, screens, all of that. So there's, as maybe always, there's pros and cons
Right.
in terms of the cultural context. We probably sleep more healthily than humans have ever slept in history. So that's gotta take can't take that for granted. We have fewer, we're less exposed to the elements. Most of us, fortunately.
Well, it's funny you say
So
that.
yeah,
I almost, because you said, I had another note here that it's called sleep. I just wrote sleep deprivation question mark, and I underlined it because it just, all this
yeah,
talk about, dreaming and the brain and activity, and you had mentioned at one point, I think it was like your bullet point 2 in one of your blogs, REM sleep. REM helps the brain grow. Where
right,
you mentioned newborns are in REM sleep about 80% of the time, while adults are around 20 to 25. So obviously, I think you use the assessment there was that REM sleep has a role in neural growth and development. So I had written, well, obviously, I feel like most of us, and I can speak for myself and pretty much everyone I know, I'm in the Washington D.C. area. Sleep deprivation is almost just par for the course.
yeah,
And the older I get, the more I'm starting to realize, well, I'm just being stupid, right? I'm just, so I just, and you kind of
yeah,
mentioned something where we're sleeping better than we ever had in history. In my mind, I was just assuming that our ancestors slept better because they were physical all day, and they were, physically exhausted most of the day because you have to wake up and find food pretty much every day. And
right,
then you pass out, and then you just sleep soundly. I know when I exercise like a maniac, I sleep like a rock. When I'm just
right,
stressed all day and sit in front of a computer and don't get a lot of exercise and, have a few drinks or whatever, and dealing with stress that way, I
right.
sleep a lot less. But so that's reassuring that we are actually doing pretty well overall. Um,
Well, yeah, yeah, that's really interesting because on the one hand, I mean, it depends on what we're using as our
sure,
baseline.
sure,
Because
right.
it to trying, I try as a scholar, not to over romanticize anybody or anything, and so it's easy to be, I think, overly critical of modernity and think, oh, back then it was all better. I mean, in
Right. Yep.
some ways,
There's definitely that.
like
It's
there
always
was,
that trend of thought. Yeah. You always want to. I feel like all of our parents said that, grandparents said that, and my
yeah,
day.
like, yeah,
Right.
well, and just so, for example, like people in Paleolithic times, like they had teeth problems. They had that now we have dental work that
Right. Oh
helps.
yeah.
So there things do change, and sleep at the level of being less exposed to the elements, to bugs, being more secure in various ways. Those are real changes that the last 100 or so years have brought. So
Right.
that's something. But at the same time, what we've done is consolidated and perhaps overly squeezed our sleep. We're trying to now see how little we can get away with. I think that's been our social experiment for the last 100 years or so.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And it's almost considered cool to not sleep, right? The Elon Musk thing and the, it's like, oh, look how busy I am. I sleep 4 hours a night, and well, you're also dying faster than and you're less creative, and I mean,
all of those things.
Right.
No, so the best. I mean, one thing to keep in mind is putting dreams aside. Sleep is an aspect of the immune system. It's part of the bedrock system of our bodies and how they stay healthy. And it's not like, I mean, this is the problem with thinking of sleep as just like, oh, my mind is just turning off. Well, I don't want to turn off my mind. I'll just keep going. Right. No, it's not just turning off your mind. It's doing this whole, it's engaging this whole complex cycle of physiological and psychological activities and neurological activities that for certainly for physical health are essential. And for people like, you're talking about the cost to creativity is especially high with sleep deprivation, and people don't appreciate that enough.
Right.
When and this I think is a key finding of research, that when we're sleep deprived, like not horribly, but like chronically for a long time at a sort of steady level, we can function. There are certain repetitive, sort of thought requiring functions that we can continue to perform.
Right.
So we, in effect, we become good robots, good machines when we're sleep deprived. We lose precisely the ability to adapt to novelty, to respond to changes in circumstances, to adapt to something that doesn't go the way one expects it. And this is again, there's research pointing to this, that sleep deprivation, the first thing to go is precisely those kind of higher, finer capacities for creative, flexible, adaptive thought. So you can be getting along and doing just fine, but man, you're probably not benefiting from the best that your own mind is capable of.
Right. Yeah, there was a little like a Twitter war, like as there's millions a day, but it was, I think, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was something between, there was a study that came out that confirmed basically exactly what you just said. And the guy, I think that the person had tagged Elon Musk and said, sorry Elon, but you could be a lot more creative if you just slept more. And it was kind of like, and I think he responded like, screw that, just get home from the lab. It's 2 a.m. or whatever.
I know. And some, I don't like shaming people first off. I don't think that's really the best way to.
All right, sure. Yeah, I think he was just being silly about it, but.
Oh, no, I know. And he's, people like him, and before him it was Thomas Edison. I mean, literally, this is a cultural archetype of capitalism that there's some super successful guy who can do it because he doesn't ever sleep, and like we're just all a bunch of saps because we take 7 or 8 hours out of our day, whereas they're just like cranking along. And I don't know about Elon Musk, but we know for a fact with Thomas Edison, he had a bed in his lab. He took naps all the time. He was a polyphasic sleeper. He wasn't a non-sleeper.
Right. So he was getting his
So it's branding. It's a persona that some people and they have both of those people, Thomas Edison, Elon Musk, they have investors. They're creating a persona of no one works harder.
Right.
Than me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's funny. The older I get, I remember that. I feel like that persona, that desire for that persona, is fading. The older I get, it's no longer like 10 years ago it was cool to be the guy, but now it's like no, it's cool to actually get a good night's sleep, feel great, and have a healthy balance. Still work very hard, but have a balance. It's actually getting cooler to do that now. It's not.
Yeah. No, here's something I think is fascinating too in sort of the research world that. Looking at the sleep patterns of animals, if you look at different ecosystems, the creatures that are kind of at the top of the food chain, whether it be a lion or a bat in a certain research has done a couple different kind of food chains, they sleep tons. And it's the creatures sort of lower down who are the food for the predators, mice, rabbits, little critters who sleep very intermittently and briefly on average. So there's something in sort of the natural scheme of things that sleep is something that those sort of at the higher end of things ideally can enjoy. And
because they're not worried about being eaten. I mean, is it as simple as?
It's as simple as that.
Yeah, right,
it's
right.
as simple as that. To wake up to eat, and so it does. Like a lot of people, I think it's a bummer that you feel like I'm potential prey. I have to keep hustling,
right.
And so find a way. So that's why I don't want to be judgmental about it. The world's a crazy place these days, but if you can kind of move yourself somehow up that chain so that you can enjoy the benefits of being able to sleep. That's the higher one goes, I think sleep becomes more and more important and beneficial. So,
well, it definitely makes sense that I would even draw the correlate to, us today, 2019, when, we've entered a whole new world where we don't worry about getting eaten anymore by a lion, but because we're sleeping under a tree, right? Which is great. That's great progress.
Right.
To your point earlier. Indeed. But now I sleep better when I have a clear mind. I'm not worried about this or that or whatever. So it's almost like, if you have any sort of, worry, duress, whether it's physical from me getting, like I said, from getting eaten, or whether you have a financial issue or, relationship issue or whatever, that'll affect you just the same. So there's that. If you're in a content state, whatever that content state may be, you're going to sleep better. I mean, it sounds almost common sense saying it, but it makes a lot of sense. But the animal relationship, that's interesting. Now you mentioned also big dreams. What define? And that was, I think, in one of your blogs. I think the first one I saw, which was cool, is like dreaming and waking, which is more of an illusion. So what are big dreams?
Yeah, so that's a term that Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, coined. Although different cultures recognize the same thing, that many of our dreams are about kind of everyday things we're involved with, we're worried about, we're thinking about. But every now and then, and maybe only once or twice in a lifetime, a particular dream will happen that will kind of blaze itself in memory. So it's literally, you can't forget it. It may have intense emotionality. It may have incredibly vivid imagery. It may have a feeling of being more real than real. There's it's kind of a cluster of qualities. But what separates it is really one way of thinking of how it's separated is that there's often a carryover effect, some sort of physiological reaction from the dreaming experience that carries over into the waking state. So, my original big dreams were that got me kind of interested in the subject were very frightening, chasing nightmares. That I'd be chased by any number of horrible antagonists, and I would wake up and the dream's over. But my heart is still thumping, my body's in a full sweat, I'm breathing fast, a carryover physiologically from the dream into my waking states. In my view, there's with an underlying purpose of remember this of all the types of dreams that you had, something about this is extra important. And Jung's term for it is kind of recognizing something that many religious traditions have recognized, which is every now and then, these kinds of dreams kind of burst through the general run of dreaming and really grab the mind and the attention.
Yeah, it's almost like it's a message, and you need to wake up and listen to it or address it. Are psychologists using this as in therapy at all? Because as we're talking through this, it's almost like
Yes. Yes.
because therapy is very complex, and I mean, obviously you're in this field. I don't know if you're clinical, but whatever.
Yeah.
But it takes a long time to get at some root issue that was layered and layered and layered, and it's like, oh, it's that person did this when I was a kid, and that's what caused it. It
Yeah.
sounds like a lot of that stuff could be almost extracted in some of these contexts.
Yeah. Oh, yes. And I mean, in terms of interpreting dreams and trying to make sense of the different layers, that's sometimes people, if they're in a psychologically difficult situation, they've got mental health issues. Yes, many different therapists work with dreams in helpful ways, just as you say, kind of getting a sense of what's going on. Dreams will often suggest, I don't want to say solutions, but kind of paths towards healing. I mean, dreaming is, again, sleep and dreaming are part of the immune system, part of how our bodies respond to stress, respond to pathogens of various kinds, keep us healthy and whole. So that's definitely in there. Myself, I am not a therapist in large part because I view dreaming as a natural part of human life, and it doesn't have to be in a therapeutic context. Like I said, if someone is having issues, they should consult with a professional psychotherapist. But hey, if things are going okay, you just have a weird dream, a really crazy dream from early in life, or maybe it just happened a couple weeks ago. That's something I think that it's natural, and it's just part of the human experience to want to explore that and maybe share it with someone you trust, a friend, or someone else who might know something about this.
Right.
Oftentimes people go to like a grandmother or something, or an uncle. Somebody in a family often will just kind of know about dreams and how to get at some of those layers.
Yeah, I've had, I think I wrote this in the article I sent you, the write-up I sent you. And I've had, and I guess recurring dreams is another topic, and it's really like, how does that fit into this? Is that, for me, it's kind of hit home when you just mentioned something like, hey, it's almost like your body's way of saying, or your mind's way of saying, remember this. Recurring dream, I always feel like it's the same kind of thing where, hey, something's going on here, remember this. There's a theme.
Yeah. Exactly, and that was very much my experience with these early. In fact, this is really what kind of got me into the whole subject. Kind of turned it from a curiosity to a vocation. Is that I began, I had a lot of these chasing dreams. They were recurrent, and it was after I read some Freud and some Jung and some other people, and particularly Jung's idea of the shadow archetype, and the idea that within each of us. We develop our certain conscious abilities, but we leave others undeveloped, and that becomes the shadow. And if we don't integrate that, then we have struggles, and that comes out in chasing nightmares.
Right.
And when I read that and kind of really thought about it, it's like, yeah, I think that might be what's going on. And as I was keeping track and paying attention to my dreams, I found that my dreams began to change, and it was like, oh, so if I kind of learn something, then the dreams themselves will kind of respond back to me, right? And so I got this sense of a potentially dynamic relationship, a dialogue between the waking self and the unconscious self, that taking recurrent dreams seriously and trying to understand what is going on with that, in my experience, and it's not just me, others as well, that can itself change the way the dreams play out, and it feels it anyway, like progress, like greater integration of personality, and to be honest, greater sense of like, that's I know better who I am now. That is me. This thing of darkness I call my own. I think that's a Tempest quote. So that's kind of the feeling of encountering one's shadow in dreams.
It's fascinating. I mean, yeah. So it really does. I mean, it just, and I've been reading a lot about mindfulness. In fact, I did a podcast a few episodes ago on mindfulness. I think it's fascinating. Meditation. I think there's so much going on in there, and I just never, to be honest, I never really looked at the dreaming side of it. But it sounds like it's just another giant tool in our toolbox that, it sounds like obviously you and others, but in my circles, like we're not even thinking in that way that we can leverage that tool.
Yeah. No, it's wonderful to see mindfulness meditation becoming more people experiencing it and realizing kind of what everything we're talking about, that the mind can change and the way we process reality can change and understand ourselves. And I think in good ways. I think this is all to the good. And back to lucid dreaming, I mean, some people consider, and in Hindu, Buddhist, and Taoist practices, lucid dreaming is basically meditation in sleep. It's just kind of continuing your meditation practice, your sort of detachment, your sort of observation, just the things passing through your mind. That just continues straight on from waking into the sleep state. So that's so yes, there's all sorts of interesting. I mean, what I like about dreaming that's different from mindfulness meditation, and let me put it, I guess, in cultural terms. I think for a lot of people these days, the world is a stressful place. There's a lot of stimuli, a lot coming at them all the time. Even your downtime, you're looking at a screen, like there's a million things on Netflix, like, oh my God. So mindfulness meditation is a great and very effective way to just like, just kind of bring it down, just kind of like really, and people need that. I get it, and it's good. To explore dreaming doesn't always have that effect. To explore dreaming is a little spicier. It's a little it's a more stimulating sometimes. It's more. It can be upsetting. It can bring back memories, and in fact, kids gonna go right at things that probably are difficult and challenging. So, I think it's not everybody is in kind of a position sometimes to really explore their dreams as much as they could or they would want to. The good news is your dreams are always there; they're not going anywhere. Right. So, and particularly, my advice is, even if you can't spend a lot of time with them, at least write them down. You can keep a dream journal somewhere. Just keep track of them. That always helps. It keeping an open door. This is certainly a practice in many cultures. They call it dream incubation, where various rituals, prayers, sleeping postures, and such are used to try to elicit a particular kind of dream. And these rituals usually work. Usually you really open yourself to your dreaming self. Something will probably come along. So, and it can be as simple, this is what I'm getting at, as just keeping a dream journal, just letting, just your mind knows at that point, if there's a really cool dream, if there's an important message that needs to be conveyed, and I'm being anthropomorphic here. I mean, it's, who knows where this is coming from, the deeper self, the higher self, the soul, the psyche, God, we can talk about that, but I'm being sort of, I'm bracketing all of that out for just a moment, and just suggesting that if we, build it and they will come. I mean, that that works. You make it and you form an intention. If I have a dream, I'm going to write it down. I'm going to record. I'm going to keep track of it. The dreaming self appreciates that and will oblige you at some point with a dream or two. And so that's I think that's how that dialogue gets going.
Yeah, you said that earlier. A dynamic dialogue between your waking self, and I wrote it down. Your waking self and your dreaming self. I mean, that if there could be any sort of dynamic interaction there, that's just. I mean, if that doesn't blow your mind, you're just not listening, right? I mean, it's the coolest thing.
Yeah,
that is.
Yeah, no, it's wild, and the thing is, the waking ego has to, and this is the challenge with lucid dreaming for a lot of people. Here, in fact, let me step back. I'll tell you a story. So, one of my mentors and best friends in this world, Jeremy Taylor. He passed away a year or two ago, unfortunately, but he told a story about how when he was first learning about lucid dreaming, he got very excited about it, and he would have dreams of flying. He would become lucid in a dream, and then boom, up in the air he'd go and fly around, because flying in dreams
Yep.
is fun, right? I'm sure doesn't love flying in dreams. So after a few, who knows, a while at this, he does this several times. He's flying along, and he looks down, and he sees down on the ground these three old wise men, kind of classic, robes and long beards and such, and they're looking up at him flying, and he hears them say, there goes Taylor again, flying, and he just, he woke up and he realized, like, oh, okay, I got that out of my system. Now I think it's time for something more meaningful and serious. And so that's, I think a lot of people go into this whole idea of being able to control your dreams and be aware in your dreams as a way of kind of playing out ego fantasies, right? And satisfy desires that you can't satisfy in the waking world. And it's fine. Go for it. There's nothing, it's your life, it's your time. I think at a certain point that becomes kind of dead end-ish, kind of, at a certain point, I think, like my friend Jeremy, one realizes that's not really leading me anywhere. And maybe this isn't about me controlling the space. Maybe it's about me opening my awareness more fully to this space and seeing what it is brought to me and what comes to me, like to open that dialogue, not a monologue, but a dialogue. Who is out there? Hello,
right.
Who's out there? And then you see what happens from there. So that's many people who follow the ideas of Carl Jung are uncomfortable with this whole theme of controlling dreams, because in their views, kind of, I follow this to a large extent. The idea is in dreaming precisely to open the conscious mind to the depth of the unconscious. So we don't want the ego to kind of get in the way of that if we can avoid it.
Well, it's funny. It sounds like an exact correlate to our waking lives, where we go through life, as we get older, we may be over-focused on money and girls and whatever, and then we realize, there's got to be more to it than this.
Yes.
And it sounds like you just gave that exact, your pattern in the dreaming life.
Yeah, and this is why I think a lot of cultures, as I've mentioned, have seen dreaming in this regard as a kind of a spiritual path. You can gain experiential insight into some of these kind of more abstract ideas. Some people will say, I kind of knew that this world was kind of my own creation theoretically, but then I have a lucid dream, and wow, now I really get that.
Right.
Like, now that really makes sense. Like, now I understand what that means at kind of a visceral level.
Really fascinating. I mean, we can probably go 6 hours in this, but now, so one last thing. I mean, one thing we'll give it maybe another 5 minutes here or so, but one time, and I wanted to just run this by you. I had read a while ago, and as we're talking, I think I know your answer, but I had read that, sometimes dreams make no sense sometimes, where you have, your mom is your third grade teacher, and you're a clown with whatever. And I don't know if I read it or had spoken up to someone about it, but it was a relatively credible source. It was because I found it in a few different places, but it was almost like your dreams are almost like your hard drive is moving. It's your brain moving memories from short-term memory to long-term memory. And as it's doing that, it's kind of defragging the hard drive, if you will, where it's moving things around. I'm putting this over here, and that's why things are getting jumbled up. That's just my layman's perspective. That seems a little more random than the conversation you and I are having, where there might be more intent to some of the vivid imagery that you're seeing.
Yeah. No, that's there's quite a lot of thinking in cognitive psychology about a lot of really good evidence, actually, that sleep and dreaming are integral to, among other things, to learning, to memory, to consolidating, particularly the emotional kind of gist of our experiences during the day. So a lot of that is definitely going on, and how far we can push kind of the computer metaphors in terms of looking at the mind. I get a little queasy at a certain point. It gets a little too
Right.
mechanical and for me. But what I'd say, about the thing with like, yes, and then there's this idea of defragging and like, oh, there might, and so there's this stuff that we're kind of sorting through
Right.
and pitching and such. And yes, that is there. I'm not sure in terms of the way human memory works, what that really means and how that would work in terms of sleep and dreaming and learning and memory. What worries me is the cultural metaphor of dreaming as being this kind of detritus, this kind of epiphenomenal, effluence that comes out of an otherwise meaningful uh, process. And the analogy that comes to mind is like, and I don't know if you've had this experience. I did. I've seen my kids have it, where you like a certain kind of music, and someone older than you like hears you playing your music, and they're like, "Oh my God,
Right.
that's just noise! Oh my God, how can you do this and that? Oh, that just hurts my ears! Oh my God, turn it off!" You're like, "You idiot! That's like the best song
Oh,
ever!"
absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
but
No.
you have to listen to it. You have to like think about it. You have to like understand what this genre is, what the
Oh,
you know.
absolutely. Yep.
That, so I really push back on the idea. Anytime people say, yeah, dreams are just really just at base, just kind of random nonsense and just kind of clouds in the sky, and we're just
Right.
projecting. Um, I think that's intellectually lazy. That's really just kind of taking the easy way out and not recognizing that, maybe the what we're talking about, this kind of unconscious intelligence, is this deeper aspect of the mind. It's not that it's crazy or random or nonsensical. It just operates in a different way slightly than the way the mind does in waking. And so, hey, maybe try, instead of just saying random nonsense and turning away, maybe try to learn that
Right.
language, or find some. I mean, yeah, build it and they will come. It really, we're all hardwired to make sense of this. This is not at a certain level something we have to get a PhD to
Yep.
learn,
Yep.
or pay a lot of money to learn. It's in
Yeah,
us.
everything is noise if you don't understand it, right? I mean, another language is noise if you don't know that language. Music that you don't, if you can't understand if you can't hear the instruments, all music's noise, right? It's everything's noise unless you
Exactly.
understand it. So yeah, I like that analogy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Now,
yeah.
and I actually I'm into all kinds of music, including death metal. I mean, the
Yeah.
stuff that's hard, and I'm a musician myself. I understand. I can
Right.
picture what the musicians are doing. Sometimes I'm blown away what
Yeah,
I'm hearing them do, and other people walk in and go,
yeah.
"Oh, that sounds like garbage. What is that? It's crazy."
I
Like,
know.
well, you're not
I
even hearing it. But
I know.
now, I guess what's Eddie. What's next in Dream Science? Like, what's the big things that maybe you and your colleagues are excited about?
Yeah, well, we're still taking the babyest of baby steps in terms of making use of sort of big data analytics for the study of
Hmm.
dreams, and part of that is we're still trying to generate the right kind of data sets, trying to find the right kind of tools. Like there's a lot of work I'm trying to do with some colleagues that I think, if we can get it right, will allow us to see patterns and at a scale we haven't been able to see before. So I'm very excited about that. I think that will have
Hmm.
applications for therapy, for probably spirituality and self-understanding, for art and creativity, perhaps. There's a lot of really cool applications coming out of that. So that's front burner for sure for me and for a lot of people.
Now, when you say big
Uh,
data, let me pause you there. Is how where is this how is this data extracted from? And where is it coming from? Is it? I mean, are you extracting? I mean, is it literally machines on people while they're sleeping, and that data is being? Is that? I mean, what is this data coming from?
No, no, these are several different sources from research colleagues of mine who have gathered dream reports from either their students or in their field research, survey research I've done, I've commissioned, other people
Hmm.
have commissioned. And then I think the best data actually these days I've come to believe is the long-term dream journal of a single individual. So I've been gathering the dreams of gathering several people who were sharing their long-term journals with me, and I think that's a way of really seeing how dreaming unfolds in the course of a human life, and so I'm very excited to see how that plays out. And then lastly, I'd just say I find it really interesting you touched on this early on, kind of this idea of dreaming as kind of a free creative outlet. I've been working with artists in a couple different settings, kind of trying to kind of like just light a spark, just like trying to find what's the right, kind of like what I was saying, like with lucid dreaming, like you just kind of let someone know that it's possible, and truly a lot of times suddenly they have a lucid dream. I'm trying to find, with working with these groups of artists, like what are the things that I can help them learn about the truth about dreams, like scientifically based, empirically grounded, things that we know about dreams that could help them unlock things they don't even know are locked.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that to me is really exciting, and I got a few projects sort of playing out that general hypothesis. So fun times in dream research.
That's excellent. Yeah, I mean, is it relatively well funded, or is it? I mean, I know more funding could always help, but
not
not
no. I mean, you know what? Canada actually, several of the people I think do a lot of good research are in Canada, and I think their system is a little friendlier towards sleep and dream research than otherwise. I mean, there are several labs around the U.S. And in Europe as well. So it's it's a different era than say even 20 or 30 years ago, when a lot of people in mental health would have had some background in psychoanalysis and depth psychology and humanistic psychology. Now there's just so little of that, and so it really is kind of the pendulum. I think these things do kind of follow trends, and I think the pendulum at this stage is kind of swung much more in a kind of cognitive behavioral direction, more pharmacological direction. I think that'll change
for sure. Unfortunately, yeah.
That'll change over time, I think.
Yeah, hopefully
that's where we're next.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunate a little bit, but hopefully that pendulum does swing, and as mindfulness becomes, I feel like there's a groundswell there, and I'm just someone who, I listen to a million podcasts, and you can kind of I consume a lot of content. You can kind of gauge where a lot of very smart, forward-leaning people are doing, and I'm hearing more than ever that people are, they're meditating. Their mindfulness is so important. It's great. It's they're figuring out ways to deal with their issues, personally, at work. They're trying to unlock that they're realizing the brain is much more powerful, and hopefully the dreaming thing is just the next stage of that. And didn't Colorado just decriminalize mushrooms or something? I mean, and I think a lot of the pros, I would say the advocates of that were saying, well, there's a lot of good to microdosing on some of this stuff. People are literally learning, they're unlocking, and they're dealing with PTSD from trauma because they're tapping into a brain on a little micro trip that that they would not have been able to to overcome. So there's something there. I mean, there's definitely something there.
Oh, absolutely, and this is where kind of the theme from the very start. I think that there's many of these practices do inevitably raise, whether you call them religious or spiritual or philosophical questions, whatever the language you want to use, they often bring people to questions of ultimacy, of big things. And I think that's, to me, that's peak humanity. That's like what we're here for, is to ponder those kinds of questions and try to live according to how we make sense of them. But it again is something that people like. It can be intense, and so hopefully people go into these things understanding like it's a path. It's not a instant kind of dramatic thing. It's a journey. It takes a while. There are twists and turns and ups and downs and work, and but things happen, and you learn. You open things up. So that's, yes, I think I share your sense of this very much. That's good to hear.
Interesting. Well, I mean, in closing, I mean, I'm sure you have a book out. I think what book? What I was going to ask you about recommended books and websites, but I know you're an author.
Yeah.
What do you got out
Yeah,
there?
yeah, yeah. Well, I wrote a book a couple years ago called Big Dreams: The Science of Dreaming and the Origins of Religion, and that's kind of an argument for why dreaming can be considered, as many anthropologists have argued over the years, but without just kind of hypothesizing, not really proving it, that dreaming is an experiential source for many of the religious beliefs that people have about the soul, about God, about the afterlife, the devil. So it's a book kind of trying to show why that idea has good, solid scientific merit. Yeah, and then the recent book last year is called Lucretia the Dreamer. Lucretia de Leon is a young woman. This is a very different book from 16th century Spain. Grew up in Madrid during the peak of the Holy Empire and King Philip II, and she had prophetic dreams that were both uncannily accurate and got her in big trouble with the Spanish Inquisition. And so the dreams are still that were recorded of hers are still available in archives in Spain. And so I studied those dream reports and wrote a defense of her against the Inquisition, basically, kind of like, hey, wait a minute, she wasn't a witch or a traitor or any of the things. She was accused of treason and heresy, but based on current research, my argument is that no, she was a big dreamer. She was a big dreamer. So, but bummer to be a big dreamer during the time of the Spanish Inquisition. So that's the kind of the cultural argument again. So yeah, so those are the two recent books.
Very cool.
I'm happy about it. Yeah.
Cool. Well, Kelly, I do appreciate your time. This was awesome. We gotta do this again. I have probably a dozen other topics here that I was jotting down that we just don't have time for right now. But
we could drill down into more specific things. Sure. No, it
absolutely.
Sounds like a lot of your interests are very much in my realm of interest as well. So fun. No, I appreciate it. It's good chatting with you.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks again, and I'll be reaching out soon. Thanks, Kelly. And that's pretty much it. This is Vinny with Unlatched Mind. Thanks for listening. See you.